Welcome to the Empathy Stories channel, where we share powerful and transformative tales of courage, justice, and redemption. Today, we bring you an inspiring story of Emily Harris, a woman who embarks on a journey of vengeance and self-discovery, facing powerful adversaries and uncovering the truth behind her family's tragedy. The night was unusually quiet in the heart of San Francisco, the city's usual hum muted by the approaching winter. Thomas Harris sat at the worn wooden table in the back room of his martial arts academy, his fingers absently tracing the edges of a faded photograph. The picture captured a happier time, his wife, Claire, standing proudly beside him and their two children, Emily and Lucas. Those days seemed a lifetime ago, far removed from the harsh reality that now defined their family's existence. The Harris family had once been well respected in the martial arts community. Their dojo, founded by Thomas himself, had been a place where students trained not only in technique, but in discipline, respect, and honor. But everything had changed 10 years ago. A deadly encounter with a rival martial arts family, the Hales, had cost Claire her life, leaving Thomas a broken man, both physically and emotionally. Worse still, Lucas, their son, had vanished shortly after, leaving Thomas and Emily to carry the burden of the dojo's survival. Emily, however, was not just a passive bystander in her family's struggle. Even as a young girl, she had shown exceptional promise in martial arts, inheriting her mother's fierce spirit and her father's discipline. While Thomas had hoped to shield her from the brutal reality of the world outside their dojo, Emily had spent the past 10 years secretly training. Her desire for revenge, for justice for her mother's death, had consumed her every waking moment. But Thomas was unaware of just how far Emily had gone. He saw her as the sweet, caring daughter who helped him keep the dojo alive, the one who still needed his protection. He didn't know that she had secretly honed her skills, preparing herself for the day when she would finally confront the people responsible for her mother's death. One cold afternoon, after a particularly rough training session, Thomas pulled Emily aside. He had been watching her closely, noticing the far-off look in her eyes that seemed to grow deeper with every passing year. "Emily," he said, his voice rough from years of emotional exhaustion, "I know you want revenge for your mother, but the path you're walking down is dangerous. It's not the way she would have wanted for you." Emily's expression softened, but a deep sadness lingered in her eyes. She had heard these words before, but they always felt empty, hollow, like a father who was afraid to admit that he was powerless to protect his family. "I know, Dad," she replied quietly, her voice betraying the weight of the years spent in silence. "But I can't rest until I know the truth, and I won't let what happened to Mom go unanswered." Thomas looked at her, a mixture of pride and fear in his eyes. He had always been proud of Emily's strength, her determination, but he also feared for her. He knew the dangers of the world they lived in. There was more at stake now than just their dojo. There was a deep, unresolved hurt that Emily was carrying, one that threatened to consume her. The tension in the room was palpable as Thomas placed his hand on her shoulder, trying to offer what little comfort he could. "I'm not telling you to give up, Emily. I just want you to be careful. There's a lot you don't know, and a lot you can't control." Emily nodded, her eyes hardening with resolve. "I know, Dad, but I have to do this. For Mom, for us." In the weeks that followed, Emily's resolve grew stronger, her training becoming more intense. She began to spend hours every day in the dojo, pushing herself beyond her limits. She could feel it, the call to something greater, the need to face the people who had destroyed her family. She was no longer the young girl who had dreamed of becoming a martial artist. She had become something else entirely, a force fueled by anger and grief, a force that would stop at nothing to right the wrongs of the past. One evening, as Emily was practicing in the dojo, a knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She wiped the sweat from her brow and walked over to answer it. When she opened the door, she was greeted by a familiar face, Marcus Hale, the eldest son of the rival family that had caused so much pain in the Harris family's life. "Marcus," she said coldly, stepping back to allow him in. "What brings you here?" Marcus was no stranger to the Harris family. He had been a part of the underground martial arts world for years, just as Emily had. But unlike her, he had never left the shadows of his family's influence. He had always been the calculating one, the one who would do anything to keep the power of the Hale family intact. "I've heard rumors," he began, his voice steady, almost too calm. "Rumors that the Yi family's legacy is still alive. I've come to see for myself." Emily's eyes narrowed, her instincts kicking in. She knew that Marcus was no fool, and that his visit wasn't a social call. He had come for a reason. "If you're here to talk business, Marcus, you're wasting your time. I'm not interested in your family's power games." Marcus smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, I'm not here for business, Emily. I'm here because your family's blood still stains my hands." The words hit Emily like a punch to the gut. Her mother's death, the reason for everything she had done, everything she had become, was still being used against her. Marcus's words were cold, calculated, and full of malice. But to Emily, they only served to fuel the fire inside her. "I'll make you a promise, Marcus," Emily said, her voice steady, though her fists clenched at her sides. "I'm going to bring everything back. Your family's empire, your arrogance, everything. I'm going to tear it down, piece by piece. And when I'm done, you'll be the one begging for mercy." As the door closed behind Marcus, Emily felt a surge of determination flood through her. She knew what she had to do. She had to become stronger, faster, better than she had ever been, for her mother, for her family, and most of all, for herself. The next few weeks were a whirlwind for Emily Harris. Her father's warnings echoed in her mind, but she could no longer ignore the pull of her mission. She spent long hours in the dojo, her body aching, but her spirit stronger than ever. Every punch, every kick, every movement was a step closer to avenging her mother's death. She was preparing for something far more dangerous than anything she had faced before, and the journey ahead would push her to the limits of her abilities and beyond. It was clear that her foes would not go down easily. The Hale family, now led by Marcus, had always been ruthless, but the true danger lay in their connections. Powerful figures who operated behind the scenes, manipulating events from the shadows. Emily knew she couldn't face them alone. It was time to find the allies she would need to fight back. One rainy afternoon, as Emily sat alone in the dojo, a familiar voice broke through her thoughts. It was her old friend, Michael, who had once trained alongside her mother. Michael had always been an enigmatic figure, quiet but fiercely loyal, a skilled fighter in his own right. He had been absent from their lives for years, but Emily knew he could help. "I heard you were training," Michael said, stepping inside the dojo. His eyes took in her worn appearance, but didn't comment. He had seen her fight before, had known her mother, and understood the depth of her resolve. "You're not doing this alone, are you?" Emily turned to face him, a small, determined smile on her face. "I wasn't planning on it, but I need you, Michael. I need help to bring them down." Michael nodded, his eyes hardening. "The Hales won't be easy to defeat, but we don't just have to take down Marcus. We need to expose the entire network they've built. If we want to make sure your family's name is cleared, we have to show everyone who's really behind all of this." Together, Emily and Michael began forming a plan. They knew the Hale family's strength didn't just lie in their martial arts prowess. The real power was in the alliances they had made with corrupt businessmen and underground organizations. As Emily honed her skills, Michael used his connections to gather information about the people who had supported the Hales for years. They spent sleepless nights mapping out the Hales network, looking for any weak points they could exploit. Days turned into weeks, and Emily's training intensified. She could feel her body transforming, becoming sharper and more precise. But what surprised her most was the quiet strength growing inside her, a sense of purpose and resolve she had never known before. She wasn't just fighting for vengeance anymore. She was fighting for justice, not only for her mother, but for the countless others who had been wronged by the powerful forces that ruled their world. Finally, the day arrived when they would make their move. Emily, Michael, and a handful of trusted allies set off for the Hale estate. where a gala was being held to celebrate their family's latest achievements. It was a gathering of influential figures, from powerful business leaders to underground operatives. Emily knew this was their chance to strike, to expose the Hales for who they truly were. The gala was grand, with opulent decorations and guests mingling under the shimmering lights. Marcus Hale was at the center of it all, his usual smug grin plastered across his face. Emily watched him from the shadows, feeling her anger swell, but she knew better than to charge in blindly. This wasn't just about confronting Marcus. It was about showing everyone the truth. As the night wore on, Emily and Michael infiltrated the event, carefully making their way through the crowd. Michael's contacts had provided them with a way in, but now it was up to Emily to deliver the blow. They reached the main hall, where Marcus was speaking to a group of guests, his voice booming with confidence. "You see," Marcus was saying, "the future belongs to those who know how to wield power. My family has made strategic alliances with the most influential figures in the world. We control the future." Emily's heart raced. This was the moment she had been waiting for. She stepped forward, her presence cutting through the noise of the room like a blade. The guests fell silent as she approached Marcus. Her eyes locked on his. "Is that so?" she asked, her voice steady, but with a dangerous edge. "Because the truth is, your family's reign is built on lies, betrayal, and blood." Marcus turned to face her, his smug grin faltering for the first time that night. "Emily Harris," he sneered, still playing the little girl. "Are we? You think you can take us down?" Without warning, Emily lunged at him, her movements fluid and precise, a display of the years of training she had endured. Marcus was quick to defend himself, but Emily's strikes were too fast, too powerful. The crowd gasped in shock as the two engaged in a fierce battle, their movements a blur of speed and skill. Emily's body was a well-oiled machine, her every movement a testament to the years of sacrifice and hardship she had endured. But even as she fought with all her might, a part of her realized that this battle was just the beginning. As the fight raged on, Michael moved into position, using his connections to expose the Hales' true nature. He broadcasted video evidence of their illegal dealings, showing the world who Marcus really was. The guests at the gala watched in horror as the truth was laid bare before them. Marcus Hale, once untouchable, now stood in the spotlight, his secrets exposed for all to see. Emily's final blow landed with a satisfying thud, sending Marcus sprawling to the ground. She stood over him, panting but victorious, her heart racing not just from the fight, but from the knowledge that she had taken the first step toward redemption for her family. But as the authorities closed in on Marcus, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story, something deeper, darker, that still lurked in the shadows. She had won this battle, but the war was far from over. Her journey was only just beginning, and she knew she had to keep moving forward, no matter the cost. In that moment, she understood what her mother had known all along. True strength wasn't about physical power. It was about the ability to rise again, even after everything was lost. And Emily would rise, no matter what it took. The aftermath of the gala was a whirlwind. Marcus Hale, now publicly exposed for his criminal dealings, was arrested, and the news spread like wildfire. Emily and Michael's plan had succeeded beyond their expectations. But despite the fleeting sense of victory, something inside Emily remained unsettled. She had avenged her mother, taken down the man responsible for her family's suffering, and revealed the truth to the world. Yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that the true battle was yet to come. The revelation about Marcus had been a necessary step. But as Emily spent more time reflecting on her journey, she began to realize that there were still many unanswered questions. The Hales were just one part of a much larger web, a network of influence and power that extended far beyond her family's tragedy. She knew that true justice couldn't be achieved by taking down one man. It had to be about dismantling the entire system that allowed people like Marcus to thrive. She stood in the dojo one evening, staring at the wooden floors as the sun set through the windows. The familiar scent of the dojo sweat, wood, and leather filled her senses. But it was no longer enough. She had spent so many years focusing on vengeance, on righting the wrongs done to her family. But now, she saw the bigger picture. The journey ahead was about far more than revenge. It was about change, about shaping a world where families like hers wouldn't have to live in fear, where power was no longer held in the hands of corrupt elites. The door creaked open, and Michael stepped in, his expression grim. He didn't need to say anything. Emily could see it in his eyes. Something had changed, and she knew that their final confrontation was drawing near. "We've learned something," Michael said, his voice low. "Marcus was just the tip of the iceberg. The people who are truly behind this, they're far more dangerous than we realized." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "Who are they?" Michael paused, as if weighing his words carefully. "There's a group, much older and more powerful than the Hales. They've been pulling the strings for decades, operating from the shadows, manipulating events for their own gain. The Hales were just pawns in their game." Emily's mind raced. "Who are they? What do they want?" Michael sighed, running a hand through his hair. "They call themselves the Shadow Council, and they control much of the world's wealth, power, and influence. They've been using organizations like the Hales to maintain control, keeping the public distracted while they consolidate power behind the scenes. If we want to truly stop this, we have to go after them. They're the ones pulling the strings." Emily's blood ran cold. The Shadow Council. She had heard whispers of such a group, rumors about their influence in the highest echelons of society, their ability to manipulate governments, corporations, and even entire economies. But to hear it confirmed, to know that the people responsible for her family's suffering were part of such an organization, it was overwhelming. "We have to stop them," Emily said, her voice filled with determination. "We can't let them keep doing this." Michael nodded. "But it won't be easy. The Shadow Council is protected by some of the most skilled fighters in the world, assassins, mercenaries, people who have been trained for years to protect their interests. We're not just fighting against a few corrupt individuals anymore. We're going up against an entire system." Emily stood tall, her resolve hardening. "Then we'll fight. We have to." With their course of action set, Emily and Michael began preparing for the most dangerous mission of their lives. They reached out to their allies, those who had helped them take down the Hales, and formed a small but capable team. Each member had a unique set of skills, from combat training to hacking, intelligence gathering, and even diplomacy. Together, they would go after the Shadow Council and expose the truth to the world. The final confrontation took place in a remote, high-tech facility hidden deep in the mountains, a place known only to those who had the means to find it. The Shadow Council's headquarters. Emily and her team infiltrated the compound under the cover of darkness, using every trick they had learned during their long years of training. But this time, they weren't just fighting for revenge, they were fighting for justice. Inside the compound, the air was thick with tension. Every corner they turned, every door they opened, was a potential threat. The building was heavily guarded, but Emily and her team moved like shadows, slipping past guards and disabling security systems. The deeper they went, the more they could feel the weight of the conspiracy pressing down on them. This wasn't just about one family's revenge anymore. This was about bringing down an entire network of corruption, greed, and manipulation. Finally, they reached the heart of the facility, a large, secure room filled with high-tech equipment and a few well-dressed individuals sitting at a long table. These were the members of the Shadow Council, men and women who had spent their entire lives hiding in the shadows, pulling strings from behind closed doors. They had no idea that Emily and her team had breached their defenses. "We've been expecting you," one of them said, rising from their seat. It was a woman, tall and composed, with a sharp gaze that seemed to pierce through Emily. "But it seems you've underestimated the power we wield." Emily stepped forward, her eyes burning with fury. "This ends tonight." The battle that followed was unlike any they had fought before. The Shadow Council's operatives were highly trained, each one more skilled than the last. But Emily's resolve was unshakable. She fought with everything she had, her movements fluid and precise, her mind sharp. Every strike, every block, was a reflection of the pain and loss she had endured, but also the strength she had found within herself. As the fight raged on, Emily finally faced the leader of the Shadow Council. It was the woman who had spoken earlier, the one who had been so confident. She was fast, ruthless, and incredibly skilled. But Emily was driven by something far more powerful than just technique. She was driven by the truth, by the need to protect her family, and by the promise she had made to herself and her mother. With a final, powerful strike, Emily brought her opponent to the ground. The leader of the Shadow Council lay defeated, her plans unraveled, her power broken. Emily stood over her, panting, her heart racing, but a sense of peace settling over her. The battle was won. The world would never be the same again. As Emily and her team exited the facility, they knew that their work wasn't over. The fight for justice would continue. But for the first time in years, Emily felt that her mission was complete. She had avenged her mother, exposed the corruption, and brought down the system that had held so many people in its grip. It wasn't just about power anymore. It was about the truth and the strength to fight for it, no matter the cost. With the Shadow Council defeated, Emily Harris could finally breathe, knowing that she had made the world a better place, one fight at a time. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey with Emily. Her strength, determination, and commitment to justice remind us that no challenge is too great when we fight for what's right. We appreciate you watching, and we hope this story inspires you to stand strong in the face of adversity.